Welcome, everyone, to the celebration of a new novel, Demon Copperhead, by Barbara Kingsolver. I'm Ben Jennings, the program chair of the Friends of the Washington County Public Library. This is the fourth time that Barbara has allowed the Friends organization to celebrate a new book, a new work by her, and we thank her for that privilege. The Friends organization was organized in the 1960s and has made significant contributions over the years by helping raise funds to improve library facilities, taking a firm stand in support of intellectual freedom, especially book censorship in the county, sponsoring cultural events and literary events, and providing financial support for special projects. After this event, if you're not a member of the Friends of the Library, we urge you to stop by over here and at the membership table and sign up. Most of you are already familiar with Barbara Kingsolver's works, so I'm not going to do a litany of biographical details. Over the last couple of weeks, I have noticed that Demon Copperhead was among the top 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. The other 3 novelists were John Grisham, David Baldacci, and Nicholas Sparks. Some of you may not know that John Grisham and David Baldacci are also Virginians. What about that? While all 4 of these writers are wonderful storytellers, what is remarkable that Barbara is a serious literary writer, not just a popular writer. It's very difficult for serious novelists to also have a popular following. That's relatively rare, and Barbara has always been able to write page-turners about serious issues. Beginning with The Bean Trees in 1988, Barbara has written about a range of social and political issues, from climate change to Native American rights to American cultural imperialism to climate change and to environmental issues. She has often remarked that she is at heart a political writer in the tradition of Harriet Beecher Stowe, Upton Sinclair, and John Steinbeck. So it is no wonder that in Demon Copperhead, Barbara has very directly paid homage to Charles Dickens and David Copperfield, obviously, whose novels expose the social ills of Victorian England. Demon Copperhead, set in Lee County, dramatizes the scourge of drug addiction in our area. In her presentation, I hope we will find out why she tackled writing about such a complicated issue, how she did her research, and why she chose to write the novel from a first-person point of view. After Barbara's presentation, there will be a Q&A with her. Welcome, Barbara Kingsolver.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, raise your hand if you can't hear me. All right, we're going to have to, they've turned it up to 11, so we're going to have to all be quiet, like we're in the library, so that we can hear. But I want to thank you, first of all, for the donation that you made tonight to your public library system. Yay, Washington County Library. I think you know that public libraries are one of the most important institutions we have in this country for free speech, freedom of information, and freedom for readers to understand the world, something we need more than ever. I think you also probably know, if you're like me, that libraries make a huge difference in kids' lives. I would not be the writer I am or the person I am without the Carlisle Public Library and the bookmobile. That was important too. And I think a lot of other country kids could say the same. We owe so much of our lives to libraries. What you might not know is that your donation tonight is going to be used for programs in the community and especially kids programming. So hooray for that. And thanks. When I see librarians, I just want to hug them. So thanks. And thank you all for coming out tonight, my neighbors. I have been on a book tour, Lordy. That's all I can say. I've been from coast to coast and up and down and on in a different city every day. And I can tell you there is no place like home. This is where I want to be. I'm so glad I live here. And with this book especially, reaching readers in my hometown and in my home region matters so much because this book is about us. And wow, I made the Bristol Herald Courier. I mean, you know, the Times, the Post, but the Herald Courier? And I'm not even kidding. I've had a lot more ink in the New York Times than I have in the Bristol Herald Courier. I know for sure that many of my dear neighbors have wondered for years if I was ever going to get a job. So now they know. I kind of have one. And for that too, I thank you because you're readers and you're the reason I have a job. And you're the reason that I love my job. It's funny that in the day-to-day, I just go to work, you know, I have a very short commute. It's wonderful. I go to the coffee maker and then I go to my desk. And I can work in my pajamas if I want to, COVID or no COVID. And it's wonderful. And you know, and I love my life. But I don't really think a whole lot until these, you know, every few years book tours where I go out into the world and talk about what I do and why I do it. I don't really think too much about my job, you know, what is my job? And there are parts to it. My job is to tell stories, and that is awesome. I mean, who gets to get up in the morning and tell lies for a living? Wait, I know the answer to that. No further political comments. No, seriously, to get up in the morning and just make up stories, make up people, to invent, to create whole psychologies and plots is really fun. But that's part of it. Telling stories is one part of it. Another part of it is telling the truth. And it might sound funny to say, but I choose fiction. I mean, I write other things too. I do journal. I write essays. I do some journalism. I write poetry, even, you know, narrative nonfiction. But my favorite thing is novels. And I think that I've settled on the novel as my favorite form because I think it's a wonderful way to tell the truth. To tell not just little truths, but big truths. Truths about the world, things that stay true over time, over generations, over centuries. Truths about the ways that people are, the ways that we want to be, the things that we can hope for outside of ourselves. And every time I start a new novel, I start it with a big truth. Like something that's keeping me awake at night because I think we should be thinking about it, talking about it, asking questions about it. You know, it's a novel is an invitation into conversation about things that we know to be true and that we want to understand better. The third part of my job, and I've thought about that especially with this book, is representation. I write about unimportant people. I always have, and it's a funny thing. I grew up considering myself an unimportant person among unimportant people. I mean, they were important to me. You know, I loved them. They were my neighbors. I grew up knowing you would do anything for your neighbor if they needed you, and they would do anything for you. But it wasn't because they were famous, and it wasn't because we would be considered great if we did it. It's just what you do. It's this thing called community. And that's who I grew up to be. A person who notices who's cooking the food, who's bringing it, who's cleaning up the dishes, who's taking care of the cattle, who's putting food on the table, both literally and figuratively, for this nation. That's what rural people do. And it's a funny thing that our national ideology, our iconography, sort of the mythology of our nation tends to glorify the individual, the great and the powerful and the solo flyer, and, you know, the idea that anybody could grow up to be president. Well, I didn't really grow up thinking I'm going to be president. And honestly, I'm so glad. But I grew up noticing how important it is to belong to the people that are looking out for you and that you're looking out for. The people that bring you dinner when somebody's died, or when you broke your leg, or when, you know, your barn burned down. So I think representing those kinds of people and representing their greatness, their honor, the respect that we can generate for, you know, the everyday and the helping hands and the people who work without applause. That's kind of what I do, and I think that's really important. And I write in particular about Appalachia because I'm Appalachian. I grew up in Kentucky, in a town way smaller than this one. And it was the county seat, 1,300 people, still 1,300 people, minus one, because I left. And I tried out living in a lot of other places in the world, and I came back here. It feels like back home. It's the other side of the mountains. But there were 7 generations of Kingsolvers living in Washington County, Virginia, before me. I go to the graveyard on graveyard day and put flowers on their graves. I feel like this is my place. And I also feel like the rest of the world, the rest of this country, doesn't see us. It doesn't hear us very well. And you know that, and I know that. If we see an Appalachian person on TV or in the movies or on the news, it's not going to go well, right? I mean, it's going to be a joke. It's going to be a hillbilly stereotype, or it's going to be a poverty documentary. And my friends, we are so much more than that. We are. So a lot of what I wanted to do in this novel, Demon Copperhead, is to show who all we are. And we have this wonderful collective pronoun, we all. We all are a whole lot more than just, you know, the pregnant teen mom and the abusive stepfather. Those people are in this book. And so is the mama next door who's looking out for everybody. So is the papa next door that shows the kids how to fish. And if you listen closely, he will tell you the meaning of life. So is Aunt June, the Wonder Woman nurse, practitioner in the clinic who doesn't give up on her patients ever. We're ecosystems of characters. And that's what I wanted to do in this book, Demon Copperhead. So I'm gonna tell you just a little more about this book, and I'll read you a little bit from it so you can hear the voice of the book. And then after that, I'm going to open the floor. You can ask questions and we can talk about whatever you want, including, I don't know what you had for dinner. But this book, this new book, Demon Copperhead, is, as Ben said, it's kind of a modern day translation of Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. And that came to me in a sort of really unusual, I'm going to say weird way, the way I had the idea to do that. And if you ask me later, I'll tell you more about it. But I'll just tell you that the thing that keeps me awake at night these days around here, because my family lives here, generations of my family, including my daughters and my little grandboys. We live in a place that has been really seriously damaged by the prescription drug epidemic. And there's a lot of talk that's happened on the large scale level, the good guys, the bad guys, the lawsuits against Purdue Pharma, the big settlements. And I'm so worried that the world will say, okay, that's over, and move on, because what we have left here is a generation of kids who've been orphaned, who've lost their parents to addiction, incarceration, or death by overdose. We have a high percentage of kids in our county, Lee County, Scott County, the whole sort of western tail of Virginia is where the OxyContin epidemic started. And that was not our fault. That was something that was done to us. So I wanted to tell the story about how that happened, so that people would see that we can't just look away. This is going to go, this is with us, and it's going to be with us forever. And the more I dug into that story, the more I found backstory. This isn't new. This is what we call structural poverty. This is not, the problems we have here, the unemployment, the terribly high unemployment, the difficult culture of education, all these things are not because we're lazy hillbillies. These things have happened over a century because we've been treated like an internal colony of the United States. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. So, how do you write a book about that? Sounds pretty dark, right? Sounds almost like Change the Channel. So I was thinking for a year and then 2 years about how to write this book. You're my readers. I love you. I don't want to punish you. I wanted to make this good. I wanted to make it interesting, a page turner, something like John Grisham, move over. No, just kidding. Arm wrestle. No. Seriously, I wanted to write about a very serious thing, but in a way that would be, just kind of a crackerjack story. Is that even possible? Well, I had a visit from Charles Dickens. And as I said, if you want to know more, you can ask me later, but I did. He came to see me. Actually, I came to see him. And he said, look, this is all I did. Orphans, foster care, structural poverty. Honey, come on, wake up. Yeah, right, sorry. Yes, sir. Charles Dickens wrote, time and again, he wrote these stories of the kids who were left behind by society that didn't care. And did his gentle Victorian society read his novels? Yes, they did. They lined up at the docks waiting for the next installment, because his books were published like in serial form, and literally people lined up at the docks for them to be delivered. So Charles, how do we do that? And he said, give him a Cracker Jack plot, and you let the child tell the story. That was the key. Point of view is everything. So I wrote the story, my own David Copperfield, from the point of view of my narrator, who begins chapter 1, I am born, just like David Copperfield. He's called Copperhead. His father was called Copperhead because he had red hair. His father died before the kid was born, but he's also called Copperhead. And his given name is Damon, so of course, because we live in a place where all men get nicknames, right? Just read the obituaries, right? Everett, Stumpy, Blevins, it's like all guys have nicknames, and they're not very nice, usually. So he's Demon Copperhead. He's my narrator, and he tells you the story, and his voice has to be the doorway into the story that will keep you turning the pages. And I'm going to read a little bit so that you can hear his voice from the beginning. And I always feel funny reading to you because you can read. I know this about you. But here we are, so I'll do it anyway. You're sure you can hear me? Yes, okay. You're being very quiet, thank you. And I'm worried about these pillars. I know there are people that have hi. So I'll just roam around because I like to do that. Okay, first, this is chapter 1. First, I got myself born. A decent crowd was on hand to watch, and they've always given me that much. The worst of the job was up to me, my mother being, let's just say, out of it. On any other day, they'd have seen her outside on the deck of her trailer home, good neighbors taking notice, pestering the tit of trouble, as they will. All through the dog breath air of late summer and fall, cast an eye up the mountain, and there she'd be. Little bleach blonde, smoking her Pall Malls, hanging on that railing like she's captain of her ship up there, and now might be the hour it's going down. This is an 18-year-old girl we're discussing, all on her own and as pregnant as it gets. The day she failed to show, it fell to Nance Peggott to go bang on the door, barge inside, and find her passed out on the bathroom floor with her junk all over the place and me already coming out. A slick, fish-colored hostage picking up grit from the vinyl tile, worming and shoving around because I'm still inside the sack that babies float in pre-real life. Mr. Peggott was outside, idling his truck, headed for evening service, probably thinking about how much of his life he'd spent waiting on women. His wife would have told him the Jesusin could wait a minute. First, she needed to go see if the little pregnant gal had got herself liquored up again. Mrs. Peggott, being a lady that doesn't beat around the bushes, and if need be, will tell Christ Jesus to sit tight and keep his pretty hair on. She came back out, yelling for him to call 911 because a poor child is in the bathroom trying to punch himself out of a bag. Like a little blue prize fighter. Those are the words she would use later on, being not at all shy to discuss the worst day of my mom's life. And if that's how I came across to the first people to lay eyes on me, I'll take it. To me, that says I had a fighting chance. Long odds, yes, I know. If a mother is lying in her own piss and pill bottles while they're slapping the kids she's shunted out, telling him to look alive, likely the bastard is doomed. Kid born to the junkie is a junkie. He'll grow up to be everything you don't want to know. The rotten teeth and dead zone eyes, the nuisance of locking up your tools in the garage so they don't walk off, the rent by the week motel squatting well back from the scenic highway. This kid, if he wanted a shot at the finer things, should have got himself delivered to some rich or smart or Christian, non-using type of mother. Anybody will tell you the born of this world are marked from the get-out, win or lose. Me, though, I was a born sucker for the superhero rescue. Did that line of work even exist in our trailer home universe? Had they all quit Smallville and gone looking for bigger action? Save or be saved? These are questions. You want to think it's not over till the last page. And it is not. So we could go any number of ways here. I could read you some more, but as I already mentioned, I know you know how to read. You can get this book, you can take it home. So I would happily read another section of, 5 minutes or so, or we could just open the floor right now and have questions. So what's the vote? Read more? Read more. Oh, a show of hands, please. Read more. Okay. Go straight to questions. I'm sorry, you are outnumbered. Maybe they can't read. No, I know. I know. Do you like my water bottle? I realized it. Yeah, is it water? I just realized it kind of looks like a bottle. On my book tour, I made a vow not to minimize my use of single-use plastic, because they always have a plastic water bottle. So I packed my water bottle and then I left it in the airport. And so the next hotel I went to had this nice water bottle. So I borrowed it. I'll take it back eventually to the Clio Hotel in Denver, Colorado. I promise. Okay. Some things have happened. As you can see, much happens in this novel. So that many things have happened. To poor Demon, he's, I don't want to give too much away, but he's not with his mother. He's been taken from his home and put into foster care. And, this is the truth. I know there are parents, there are really good people who take in foster kids and are saints on earth and who do this out of love. There are also people who take in kids because of the check that they get every month. And there are people who take in foster kids as a source of free farm labor. This is because the foster care system is broken. It's run, I'm just telling you the truth. It's run as a for-profit business. And in places like we live now, and in many other places, the safety networks we have in place for kids are threadbare. They're the last priority. And so this is one of those situations where Demon has been taken into a home, a farm, a struggling tobacco farm run by an old man named Mr. Creakle. They call him Old Creaky. And he takes in boys kind of on an emergency basis when they can't find any other place. He'll take these boys and he works them in his field. So in this situation, he's got an older, and he was married, but his wife has died, so he's a widower. She was nicer to the boys, but that's all gone. So he's got in this farmhouse an older boy named Fast Forward. He's a football star, Lee County High School football, as you know, is the center of the universe. If you're from Southwest Virginia. And so fast forward is the quarterback, and he's, these boys think he's God. He's 17. He drives a Ford Lariat pickup truck. He rules the roost here. He's very manipulative. He's the dangerous friend. So we have fast forward. Little Demon is about 11. The other two kids temporarily here, they come and go. One is called Swap Out. He's got a lot of troubles. And the other is called Tommy. So we've got Tommy and Swap Out and the older boy. Fast forward. So here is poor Demon. It's his first week on the farm. Time went by and promises were kept. First the hay. Creaky did the mowing on his tractor while we were at school. Then came baling, with his tractor pulling this ancient baler machine that kept breaking down every 50 feet. It would make a hellacious grinding noise, and every single time in his raspy voice he'd yell, "Goddamn piece of Tazewell shit!" He must have bought it from somebody over there while the dinosaurs still roamed in Tazewell County. He'd have to stop and shut everything down, and then he and Fast Forward, but mostly Fast Forward, would climb up on the baler and reach in and yank stuff around, and then it would work again. The rest of us hauled and stacked the bales in the field to get ready for loading them on the truck. These were the square bales a person can carry, not the giant round bales most farms went over to at that time, where tractors and forklifts do the work. No, sir. Creaky had his slave boys, and we were a shit show. First of all, Tommy had his good points, but being strong, not one. He'd grab a bale with both hands on the twine, then stand there going red in the face like he's constipated until I got over there to help. And Swap Out, Christ. One hay bale weighed as much or more than Swap Out, and all this kid wants to do anyway is climb onto the piles we're stacking to where he ends up knocking things over in just general nonsense. We have to get all 200 and some bales into the flatbed, a load at a time, then unloaded and stacked in the barn with more climbing, constipation faces, and nonsense. By then, Creaky is cursing the Foster's agency even worse than Tazewell County as far as trading in damaged goods. That was my first weekend. Sunday night, I never got to take a shower, due to Fast Forward taking his time in there. There was another bathroom downstairs with an old nasty tub, but the sewage backed up there on a routine basis, so I was not the only one scared of that tub. Even Creaky used the upstairs. It took all I had left in me to haul ass up into my bunk and lie there on fire, my whole body itching from getting scrubbed by 200 Brillo pads of hay. I had 3 weeks to serve in this prison, and not one of them fully behind me yet. I wondered how Mom was doing. She always said drying out was the worst hell imaginable, and I felt sorry for that. Not now. Tell me about hell, I told her in my mind. All you had to do today is your moral goddamn inventory and a lot of lying around on nice, clean sheets. Okay, another few pages? Yes or no? Yes, okay. All right. Another promise kept, our farm party. Fast Forward had mentioned about getting supplies, and I thought maybe items from aisle 19 of Walmart, Solo cups, paper plates. That's the dumb kid I was. First, he brought out the snacks, which I was utterly thrilled about. At night in those days, I'd get homesick of just thinking of the Snickers Mom kept in the fridge. So now I'm all Reese's and cookies, yes, thinking that's what this party was about. Fast Forward, though, was patient with my education, like a big brother, honestly. He said, this was my initiation. We had this party in his room, which was amazing, getting to look around and even touch some of his stuff, which is how I found out those gold sports trophies they give you in high school are actually plastic. But they looked amazing. We had the lights shut off and a candle burning that we got from the kitchen stash for the power outages. Creaky, gone to bed. After he's taken his hearing aids out, they said he'd just as well be a corpse. Fast Forward's room had a window where you could see trees outside. The moon was almost, but not quite round. He had a rug that same shape that Mrs. Creaky had made for him by braiding up rags whenever she was dying of her cancer. As sick as she was and on drugs galore, all she wanted to do was make that rug for his room. We sat in our little circle on the rug, thinking of the dead lady that wanted to be Fast Forward's mom. We ate the candy and cookies. He passed around cigarettes, and we smoked those. Tommy smoked like a kid, taking little sips of smoke and coughing them out, whereas swap out was a natural. I was somewhere in between, this being my first non-menthols. Fast Forward said every member of our squadron had a secret name that he alone could give them. Now I was to get mine. He looked at me for the longest time. Head cocked back, the wild, dark, curly hair, his eyes squinted like he's rummaging around in my skull closet. Finally he said, Diamond. He's bright and shiny and worth a lot, harder than anything there is. For a guy to talk like this or even look that hard at another guy was not at all the normal. A straight guy, that liked girls, which Fast Forward definitely did. But Tommy and Swap Out just nodded their heads. Yes, excellent, Diamond. Not even awkward. It was just the magic of this guy. You took his word for the gospel and felt like a bigger person for having him notice you. I said, okay, but I thought diamonds were for rich people or girls getting engaged. He said, that too. What you've got, the girls are going to want. I was embarrassed, of course, and told him no way, but he said he was never wrong about such things. I would see. Just give it a few years. We talked then about movies he'd seen. Tommy told Fast Forward I had a talent of drawing superheroes, and he said, yeah, let's have a look. So I went and got my notebook, and Fast Forward was impressed. I only showed him my better ones, like where I had drawn Aunt June in the sexy Wonder Woman outfit with the bra type on top. He wanted to know where Aunt June lived. Then Fast Forward got on the subject of some of the hotter girls that he'd screwed, which of course we were all ears to that. And from there we strayed on to weirder topics such as zombies. And what if Mrs. Creaky was still lying in the back bedroom of that house somewhere, which is nuts. I told him I'd had that exact same thought the first time I ever came in the house, and the other guys doubled over laughing and said, don't, you just told us that a minute ago. Then I had to think extra hard about whether I was just thinking my thoughts or saying them, because I was high. I'd been high before on many things, such as hairspray, magic markers, and a typewriter duster borrowed from the main office at school, but this was another level. Each thing I looked at or thought about or ate was like a series of time bubbles popping one by one. I asked Fast Forward, what the heck? And he said the cookies were special. A girl named Rose that was auditioning to be his girlfriend had made the cookies, and what did we think? Did Rose pass the test? And we're like, well, yeah. I looked at Swap Out and Tommy, wondering if they were wise to all this, and the answer was yes, they were. Falling against each other, laughing like idiots, but also, to me, they looked like better versions of their everyday selves. Fast Forward told us to close our eyes. I heard him digging around. A secret hiding place, maybe. Uh-oh, did we lose the... Oh, no. Can you hear? No. Where's our tech person? Sorry. Just when it's getting interesting.
go check with Leah.
Okay. So sorry about this. You really can't hear if I project, huh? Yeah? Okay, we'll give it a go. All right. I heard him digging around, a secret hiding place maybe, because after a minute he said, "Booyah!" Remember that, 90s? And he was standing over us holding a hat, just a regular green ball cap, but he's holding it in both hands like a bowl of treasure. He sits back down from standing, just drops into a cross-legged sit while holding that hat in his hands. And even in my messed up state, I'm impressed by the physical act of that. Exceptional motor skills. We all lean forward to look, and by the glow of the candle, I can see it isn't gold in that hat, but little dots, which are pills. Not all the same. And I get what a farm party is. PHARM. He passes around the hat, and we each take something. I have no idea what I've got. I recall feeling it on my tongue, how I felt it going down, and then felt the rug on the floor all sweet and solid under my back as I lay there with my brothers and looked at the buttery light washing around on the ceiling. A 10-year-old getting high on pills. Foolish children. This is what we're meant to say. Look at their choices, leading a life of ruin. But lives are getting lived right now, this hour, down in the dirty cracks between the toothbrushed nighty-nights and the full grocery carts, where those words don't pertain. Children, choices. Ruin, that was the labor and materials we were given to work with. An older boy that never knew safety himself, trying to make us feel safe. We had the moon in the window to smile on us for a minute and tell us the world was ours, because all the adults had gone off somewhere and left everything in our hands. Okay, now seriously, can you hear me in the back? Raise your hand, yes? Okay. I mean, I don't want to just sit here while we wait for salvation, so I'm going to say, let's just start question and answers. Who's got a question? Yes, they're in the back, yeah.
Hi, I'm Karen Orchard, and I teach at Abingdon High School and have a creative writing class. What advice or encouragement would you give to young writers looking to pursue a career?
Okay, the question was, she's a creative writing teacher, yay. Thank you. And what advice would I give young writers seeking a career, you said? Well, those are two things. To young writers, I would say, just write. Write your heart. Write your hopes. Write your dreams. Write your angers. Write down what happened today, and then write the version of it that you wish had happened today. That's what I did growing up. I just wrote. I had somebody, when I was 8 years old, somebody gave me one of those, oh yeah, how's this? Oh, yay. Hallelujah. Thank you very much. I was starting to lose my voice. When I was a kid, well, I loved to read. Books were just magic to me, and they opened windows into the world. And I loved words. I read everything I could get my hands on. And this is in the advice column to kids who want to write. Read. Read and read and read. Whatever interests you, or just whatever you have. We lived in the country. We didn't get to the library often enough. But we had the Encyclopedia Britannica. So my brother and I split it up. He started at A. I started at Z. Went backwards. Our plan was to meet in the middle, and then we would know everything. So reading was like nourishment to me. So cultivating that hunger for words is gonna help. I mean, it is like nourishment. What comes in is related to what comes out. So I'll just tell you myself as a little kid, writing was just my way of making sense to the world. When I started to say, when I was 8 years old, somebody for my birthday gave me a 5-year diary. Can you picture those little, it had a tiny lock with a key, like which you could pick with a bobby pin. And the lock was entirely gratuitous because everything I wrote in there would put you to sleep. But I just remember the thrill of all those blank pages and saying, I can fill these up myself. So I wrote, like, I went to school, and then I read a book, and now I'm writing in my diary, and pretty soon I'm going to go to bed. But, but somehow, I mean, I was 8, come on. But, that grew into, I read poems, and I liked the idea of writing poems. I liked meter and rhyme. I wrote stories. I just wrote because it helped me to process my life and my experience. I always felt like time was this, life was sort of passing by like a river, and if I wrote about it, I could kind of pin it to its banks and hold it still and look at it. So if that's how a kid feels, I would just say feel it and do it and go for it. And for young writers, the ones that you teach, I would say just embrace the joy of creating, of using words to create an experience that's your own, a story that's your own. Write stories, make stuff up. The career part, that's different. I can't really tell you about that. I never expected a career as a writer. I didn't know anybody growing up. I knew farmers. I knew farmers' wives. I never knew a writer. I didn't know a regular person could be a writer. And in the culture, the Appalachian culture is a culture of modesty, right? Like the tall weed gets cut. You don't get above your raisings. You belong to your people. And I feel like growing up, for a kid to have said, maybe it's different now, I don't know, because kids have much more access to the world through various media. But when I was growing up, for a kid to say, I want to be a writer and write books when I grow up, would be so just like saying, I'm going to be a fairy. I'm going to be Tinkerbell. It just would have been ridiculous, So I didn't think about it. I felt so lucky to get to go to college. Not very many people from my high school ever did that. We had no guidance, as far as like didn't know you had to take the ACTs and that sort of thing. So I was really lucky that I got to go to college. And once I got there, I thought, I need to learn everything I can so I can make a living. And I sort of took a practical approach. I loved biology, so I studied biology. And then I went to graduate school and studied biology more because, I loved it. But I loved everything in college. I took an anthropology course, and that was great. And I took, computer science, and that was great. I wanted to major in everything. And eventually, skipping over a bunch of years, I found the perfect career because as a writer, you get to major in everything. Every new book is a whole new, dissertation. You get to dive in and research. So I think separating I want to do this for a living, which is, I would not encourage, I would encourage kids to be less like me and more, sort of free to articulate ambitions for their futures. But writing as a career is something that will come to a person if they love to write, because you have to love it to do it a lot. anything you're passionate about, anything you love to do, like, fixing cars or cooking food, you will do with passion and with endurance. And so that's how you get good at it. I think that for kids in college, if they, have, kids later on who are thinking about life plans, the only thing I would suggest would be really helpful for a writer is to study other things besides writing. And I can only say that because that's what I did. I didn't follow I followed the science track. I took one creative writing course. I loved it. I said, this is great. And then I took a math course and a chemistry course. But I really find it a great advantage now that I know a whole lot about science. And so I have this whole sort of body of knowledge at my disposal that I can put into novels that's unique, because not many other novelists, are writing about biology or climate change or these other things. So that's I don't know if that's advice. It's just kind of a riff. So there you go. So yes, right here.
You just gave us a good advertisement for liberal arts education.
Liberal arts education. Yes, sir.
My question, you said earlier that Damon's voice is the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested in your talking a little bit about how you found that voice. How many doors did you have to open before you found the right one?
Well, this is where it gets strange. This is my conversation with Charles Dickens. I really had no idea how to tell this story until I was at the end of a book tour, and I was in the UK, and that explains a lot, because at the end of a book tour, you're delirious. And so I had a weekend to kill before flying home, and just on an absolute whim, I booked myself, and Stephen flew over, so we had the weekend together. So I booked us into this place called Bleak House. It was run as an inn on the shore and in Broadstairs, England, and it was where Charles Dickens lived and where he wrote David Copperfield. So I thought, well, that sounds good. How Dickensy could it be? Well, it was so Dickensy. It was like this brick mansion, this dark brick mansion kind of leaning over a cliff towards the sea, and we knocked, and it was a dark and stormy night, it really was, sleeting, and we knocked on the door, and here behind the desk is Bob Cratchit. I'm not going to And then here comes this tiny little woman limping, literally limping. And it's like, it's Little Dora. And this is not a reenactment, these are real people. But the whole atmosphere was charged with Dickens. And they said, well, we were the only ones there, so we could just have the run of the place, because nobody else comes to Broadstairs, England in November when it's sleeting. So we went upstairs, moved into Charles Dickens's bedroom, and have you heard this story before? Okay, good. I've told it a few times. Okay, so roaming around the house, I was drawn to this little room at the end of the hall that was Charles Dickens's study. And it was, there was his desk, pushed up against these windows, these tall windows with green drapes, looking out over the dark sea. This was his desk. There's his stuff sitting around, like his manuscripts and playbills and stuff. This is like here there'd be a velvet rope, right? This is another world. They said, sure, you can sit at Charles Dickens's desk. So I did. So there I sat, feeling deliriously charged with this visit with Charles Dickens. And I kind of put my head on the desk and was like, what do I do? And I heard him talk to me. And I don't talk to dead people, like almost ever. But it just, he really did sort of inhabit that place and say, look, this is, you can do this and you have to do this. You write, you tell the truth, but you let the child tell the story. And it was really in that moment that I understood that I had to have a voice. I had to have this narrator, my own David Copperfield, and that voice came to me right there. I sat at actually I ran back to the bedroom where Stephen was in the bed, and I said, I just had this conversation with Charles Dickens. and where are you, Stephen? Where is he? Okay. All right, you want to know what he said?
I said something like, I can't wait to talk about this in the morning.
When you live with the novelist, you learn to roll with it. So I got my notebook and my pen, and I went back to that desk, and I just really, the voice of Demon, I started hearing him speak, and I was like over the skeleton of David Copperfield. I just saw the whole thing rolling out, starting with chapter 1, I am born. I heard him say, first of all, because that's how you'd say it here, first of all, I got myself born. I heard him speak, and that voice was so strong. In fact, he wouldn't shut up. So I brought Charles Dickens home with me, which you can do now because you can download any book that's, with its copyright expired. You can download it on your iPad and you can read it on the flight home. And I just saw this is going to work. And so I wrote the book and it was like it was a master class in Dickens because I just studied it. I studied David Copperfield chapter by chapter, and I saw the tricks. I mean, okay, we use tricks. We're novelists. We're manipulating you. I'm just gonna come out and let you know. Like, 66 chapters. These little 8-page chapters. You know how that is, right? You're in bed, you're reading, you say, oh, only 6 more pages. I gotta finish this, right? And then you get to halfway down the last page, there's this hook. And so you say, well, I'm going to read the next chapter. So stuff like that. Dickens has this, he's, we're friends. He uses what I decided to call cadences of coincidences. It's like there's a character who comes to the front, and then he fades from importance, and you're starting to think, I miss Rose. I'm starting to miss, Uriah Heep, whoever. And then, boom, there he is. And it works because you wanted to see them. So all these different things came clear to me, and he just showed me how to write this book. But the voice of Demon, that is pure Southwest Virginia. And I know that voice because I raised 2 daughters, and I've spent a lot of time around teenage boys. So I know what they sound like. And I'll also say that the first draft, I let him go. He was very angry. He dropped F-bombs all over the place. I just, out of curiosity, when I got to page 200, I thought, I'm going to do a search, like a text search on my computer. How many times has he said the F word in 200 pages? 175. But I just let him go. The first, I just let him roll, but then with successive drafts, because there are always lots and lots and lots of rewrites, I dialed him back. I dialed back his anger. I dialed back he uses the vernacular of Southwest Virginia, but I even had to take care with that because you have to invite the reader in. You have to kind of get the reader on board with the character, and then you can start to, show the more sort of the deeper colors, the anger, the resentment, and also the Southwest Virginia accent. Like, for example, I'm just going to tell you certain words, like holler, I reckon. I didn't use those in the first pages. I say I reckon all the time is a perfectly good way to talk, But people from outside of here, if they see I reckon, they put, a straw hat on that character and a jug with XXX. I mean, it's just, that's what we're dealing with, that kind of stereotype. So I had to take a lot of care in revisions with sort of revealing him in layers as I got you on his side. So that's the story of Demon. Okay, way back there, yeah, by the wall. Yeah.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing your talents with us through your works. My name is Leslie Parsons, and I'm a psychiatrist and an addiction medicine specialist.
Uh-huh.
And I'm very interested in hearing how you research all the aspects of addiction that you cover so beautifully in this book.
Thank you.
How do you do that? Do you go?
I will answer. The question is, she's an addiction counselor, and the question was, how did I get into that world of addiction and present it from the inside, which was really important to me to do. Something I knew I was up against from the beginning was the fact that there are a lot of preconceived ideas people have about addiction and so-called addicts, that it's a failure of will, that it's a series of bad choices. We've had 50 years now of the war on drugs as an important part of our government and our culture. The war on drugs, which was actually originally the war on hippies, and then it was the war on non-white people. It was, we've just been, DARE officers, we've just been brainwashed as a society into treating addicted people as criminals. Incarceration doesn't cure addiction any more than it cures cancer. And in fact, addicted people who go to prison are extremely likely, in the immediate time after they're released, to die of overdose because of various physical changes that happen in the body. So it was really, one of the things I wanted to do with this book was to show how this is from the inside, to show that addiction is a disease, and it can only be treated if we think of it as a disease. If we stop treating it like, imagine if your daughter had cancer and you said, well, honey, when you hit bottom, I'll give you chemo, but meanwhile I'm throwing you out of the house. It's laughable, but it's not. That's how we approach this. So I needed to know a lot about this life, how it happens to people. Nobody wants to be an opioid addict. How it happens to people, how it feels from the inside, how hard and terrible that life is, and what it takes to come through to the other side. I made friends with Dr. Art Van Zee, who's a superhero. You might know of him. Yeah. Dr. Van Zee is a doctor. He has a clinic in St. Charles, Lee County, and he was one of the very first people to sound the alarm about what OxyContin was doing to his patients. This drug was heavily pushed into, well, you probably know, this region was chosen by Purdue Pharma after they studied metrics. It was chosen as a region that would be vulnerable, so that they could really pour the numbers are shocking, like thousands of pills per man, woman, and child in some of these counties were prescribed every year, swearing that it was not addictive, showing these doctors studies that were manufactured, that were not true, proving that it was not addictive. And they chose, for a whole lot of reasons, because the medical care system in our region is stretched so thin, a lot of these doctors only get one chance to see these patients because they don't have time off, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have other pain treatment options that are available in more wealthy places. Anyway, for all these reasons, this drug got pushed on us. So Dr. Van Zee invited his patient, most of the patients he treats now are in recovery. He treats them for addiction recovery. So he sent an email to his patients inviting any of them who wanted to talk to me to tell me their stories, which was so helpful. And so many people came forward, and I sat with them, and I listened to their stories, and I cried, and my heart broke over and over again. And I want to tell you, every one of these people, they were all women who came forward, mostly young. Every one of them started with a prescription because of an injury, a sports injury, a work injury, a prescription from a doctor with the instructions, you take this, you set your alarm clock, take this, stay ahead of the pain, because that's what the doctors were told was necessary to do. By the time they finished that first bottle of pills, their brain chemistry was already changed so that they felt horribly sick unless they could get the next pill. And that's how it starts. It's not a weakness of will, it's a disease. So I listened, and I told these women, I'm not going to put you in my book, you're not going to be a character, but I want to hear, how this happened for you, how it felt, how hard it is, how hard that life is. It is, a demon says at one point, addiction is not for the lazy. It is such hard work to wake up every morning, find your means, find your connect, get what you need, not to be dope sick. Not chasing a high, not chasing a good time, just trying to feel like you're not going to die. So once I listened and just felt just deep compassion for these people who became my friends, I felt like I could represent it from the inside. And I sent the manuscript when I was finished for them to read, to tell me how they felt. And I said, you're not in this book, but I will warn you that some of the terrible things that happened to you, you'll recognize. And I hope this is okay, and I hope it's not traumatizing. Every single one of them loved this book. And I said, isn't this hard? And they said, no. Living that life was hard. What's wonderful is to be seen. So that's what I'm asking of all of us, to see this disease. These huge settlements, as they start to trickle back, there is not enough treatment. There is so little treatment available for people here. A lot of the money is going into incarceration and stricter controls instead of meeting people where they are to help them find the treatment they need. So one of the things I really hope for is that people who read this book will have compassion, will get involved, and will vote, and will do other things to make our communities more productive and helpful to people who need treatment for this disease. So thank you for your work. How are we doing on time? I don't even know what time it is. What time is it? Somebody holler. It's 8:45? Okay. I think we can have a few more questions. Well, you're right on the front row.
We're on the front row.
Okay.
I'm a visual artist, so I have a creative question for you.
Okay, a creative question.
Yeah, so I have complete control over what I am creating and putting out. Are you limited by your editors or who are publishers, or do you have the final say?
Okay, the question is, he's a visual artist and enjoys having complete control over what he produces. So do I. I am so lucky. I've been with the same publisher for 36 years, since the Bean Trees. My publisher has always been, and I will credit my agent from the beginning. This is the real stroke of luck. I found an agent who was my fierce fairy godmother, who recognized my vision and what I want to do in the world, and she made sure that I never had to compromise. She wore lightning bolts on her shoulders. She was the tough person that I can't be, because I was raised here. I'm nice, right? So she would go, meet with the editors, and then I could be all nice. But honestly, I also credit my publisher. I'm going to credit you, my readers. My publisher doesn't censor me because you readers will follow me anywhere, whatever dark and scary place I go, you go there with me, and as long as that's happening, my publisher is as happy as they can be. Seriously. And so, I credit my readers with their commitment and their, it's not always easy, to face these subjects that make us uncomfortable. But, I'm so grateful that my readers continue to do that. But no, I write my books and I turn them in, and I don't have, there's no sort of editorial board that, tells me what I can and cannot write. In the The Bean Trees, I just was published exactly as I wrote it. My first novel, there was one sentence that they asked me to change, and I don't even remember why. But basically, I give my manuscripts to readers to vet, to my friends in recovery to vet, to help me find mistakes in representation or whatever, or in facts. I asked Dr. Van Zee to read it for medical details, that kind of thing. I welcome feedback for people who can help me make the story, more honest and more accurate. But as far as writing, as far as work that asks difficult questions and might make people feel uncomfortable, that's kind of what I do. That's my MO. And I will tell you honestly, this book, because it is so Appalachian, I was really scared to send Demon to New York. I was really worried on his behalf because of the stereotypes, because of what so many people think we are, and because this book actually challenges some of those urban assumptions about, how we live in the middle of nowhere. Like, have you heard that? How can you live there in the middle of nowhere? That we think actually is the middle of everywhere. So this actually, when Demon goes to a city for the first time, he's like, how do people live here? There is no outside anywhere. Because I looked, he says, where did these people even grow their tomatoes? So I sort of flipped that around and showed how kind of desolate a city can appear to a person who's accustomed to living under trees and gardens. So I was pretty nervous because publishing is a very New York-centric industry. But I'm really pleased to say that my New York people were on board from the beginning. They've really, really backed this book. And I've heard from a lot of people who've said, you made me check my assumptions about Appalachian people. So here we go. All right, I think we can take, oh gosh, this is hard. One or two more questions. Yeah, back there.
I don't have a question. I just want to share a few of my thoughts. My name is Yasmin Joshi, and I'm a physician here for the last 9 years.
A physician. It should be a question, though. Do you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay, I think we should just turn it over for a question, but thank you for your work. Who has a question? Okay, right here.
The other people that are writing that are on the top of the New York Times tend to be more formulaic and from book to book. You recognize where it's going to go, kind of. But your books, each one is its own fashion.
Well, we're talking about the difference between commercial fiction and literary fiction. And that's, it's not a negative judgment. People who write commercial fiction are very happy to write commercial fiction. You would ask them and they would say, yeah, that's what I do. I'm laughing all the way to the bank. So what's the question?
The question is, your books are more like children. It's like each one is wrapped up, it's got its own personality.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if any of those is the dear precious child to you, or you feel the most that you...
Oh, am I most attached to any of my literary children? Well, I appreciate first you raised the point about commercial versus literary fiction, which Ben brought up too. And so I'll talk about that first, and then I'll answer your question about which is my favorite, of my books. Commercial fiction is wonderful. I am happy that so many people still read for pleasure. Fiction is an active rather than passive form of entertainment. When you read a book, you have to make the pictures in your mind. You're not just watching, you're actively engaging. So you're doing half the work. You're bringing your own image bank and your own experience to the novel, even if it's very formulaic, even if it's a romance and you know what's going to happen, you're still seeing those characters. And I am so happy that most people on planet Earth still know how to do that. When Harry Potter came along, I said, hallelujah, a whole generation of boys has been saved from never learning to read. And when I say, I don't mean learning to read, letters, I mean learning to read for pleasure, to do that magical thing of making the pictures and hearing the voices in our mind. And I think, some people go to books for different reasons, and I would, in the simplest terms, I would say the difference between commercial and literary fiction is that commercial fiction, you read to find out what's going to happen, and when you're done, you're done. You won't read that book again. Literary fiction, you read for the experience of being there, being in the book, and when you finish it, you might still read it again. There are many books that I read over and over time. Middlemarch is one, for example, because just every time I go back in there, into that world, I learn new things. So I'm really happy to see that list of, the Colleen Hoovers and and Colleen Hoover and Colleen Hoover and Colleen Hoover. But, those writers tend to be more prolific because it doesn't take as long, to write a more formula-driven book. But I'm happy they're there. I'm happy people are reading them and that they'll cross over and they'll read, something else. To answer your question, yeah, and the other thing is literary fiction it's not predictable, so each book is going to be its own world and its own thing. And yeah, I love doing something completely new with every book, starting absolutely from scratch, setting up a new question, a new way of answering it. With every book, I try to do something that I've never done before, and ideally that nobody's ever done before. Because that's fun. That's what gets me to my desk every morning is that terror that I'm not gonna be able to do it. It's a funny thing. I love the risk. That's how I know I'm working at the edge of my powers. Of all, there are 17 now. I have 17 literary children. They are all different. I can't say any more than I would choose a favorite among my children. Like our children, we know which ones were difficult. We know which ones are going to come back around. But what I would say is what most literary writers would say is, my favorite book is the next one. And so there will be a next one. And I want to wind up by backing up to talk just a little minute about that process we were discussing of how you take a book and you make it your own. That is so important. It's important to me and it's important to the world. I consider when I've written a book and send it to the world, I've done half the work and you do the other half. Each one of you does the other half. You bring your whole lifetime of hopes and fears and mistakes and wishes to that book and you make it your own thing. So a book becomes a personal experience for everyone who reads it. And that's magical. There is no other art form that takes you inside the brain of another human being, so that you're looking out at the world through their eyes. Their children become your children. Their worries become your worries. For the time that you're reading that book, you've put your life down on the bedside table, and you've entered another human. If we can cross that barrier, if we can keep doing that, really feeling what it's like to be the other, to be a person who's lived a life different from ours, then, my friends, there is hope for us. I think we can do this. So thank you so much.
There are still books over here to purchase and do, especially those who live in Washington County, do become friends of the Washington County Library. There are forms over here. Thank you.
Oh,
And
let
thank
me say
you.
one more thing. I am really sorry I can't sign your books. This is hard for me. This is the first tour that I haven't, and I'm just going to take 30 seconds to tell you why. Does anybody know what Dupuytren's contracture is? Yeah, okay. I have that, and it's, luckily it doesn't kill you, but it wrecks your hands. I've had 6 surgeries on this hand. My doctor said, my surgeon said, no more book signing, because it accelerates the contracture. I only do flat-handed stuff, like typing. If you let me keep my hands, I will write you more books. Thank you so much.